She dropped to her knees in the dust, not because she wanted to, because the chain around her ankle pulled tight and wouldn't give another inch. Summer heat pressed down on the trading post like a brand on cattle hide. 10 feet away, a rancher was counting coins for a stallion. She opened her cracked lips. "Don't buy the horse," she said. Her voice broke on every word. "Buy me instead. I can work. I can cook. I won't run. Please, mister." He turned. Their eyes met, and nothing in Dalton Creek was ever the same again. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me till the very end. I promise this one's gonna stay with you. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Silas Reed rode into Dalton Creek with dust on his boots and death on his mind. Not his own death, though. Some mornings the thought sat closer than it should. No, it was the cattle. 6 head already gone in 2 weeks. Bellies swollen, eyes glassed over, legs folded beneath them like they'd just given up. He had no idea what was killing them, and nobody within 40 miles seemed to care enough to tell him. The trading post sat crooked at the edge of town, a sun-bleached wreck of pine boards and rusted nails that looked like it might collapse if you leaned on it wrong. A painted sign above the door read, "Dalton's Trade and Supply." Half the letters had peeled off in the heat. Silas tied his horse to the rail and pushed through the door. Griff Dalton stood behind the counter, a wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth and eyes that moved too fast. He looked up, grinned, and spread his arms wide. "Well, hell, Silas Reed, ain't seen you since your brother's funeral." "Wasn't a funeral," Silas said. "Was a hole in the ground." Griff's grin faltered. "Right. Well, what brings you down from that rock pile you call a ranch?" "Cattle's dying. Need medicine. Sulfur powder if you got it. Turpentine. Anything for bloat or worms." Griff sucked his teeth and shook his head. "Sulfur's been out since May. Had a shipment due from Reno, but the wagon broke an axle near Washoe. Ain't nobody in a hurry to fix it." Silas's jaw tightened. He gripped the edge of the counter. "Then what do you have?" "Got whiskey. Got salt. Got a real nice saddle someone traded in last week." "I don't need a saddle, Griff. I need something to keep my herd alive." Griff leaned back, studying him. "How many head you got left?" 14. "Started with what, 30? Silas didn't answer. His silence said enough. Griff whistled low. "That's a hard summer, friend. Real hard." He paused, then lowered his voice. "Listen, I got a stallion out back. Young, strong, good lines. You could sell him in Virginia City for $60, maybe $70. That'd buy you enough medicine to—" "How much for the stallion?" 40. Cash. Silas reached into his coat and pulled out a leather fold. He counted the bills slowly. $32. Everything he had left from the spring cattle sale. Everything between him and winter starvation. "I'm short," he said. Griff shrugged. "Then I guess you're stuck." Silas stared at the money in his hand. $32. His brother Jesse had died with less than that in his pocket. A Union soldier's pay, blood-soaked and crumpled, pulled from a dead man's coat at Shiloh. Silas still carried one of those bills in his vest. He never spent it. Never would. "Let me see the horse," he said. Griff led him through the back door into the yard. The heat hit like a wall July in Nevada, the kind of heat that turned the air itself into something you could chew. Dust devils spun lazy circles across the packed dirt. The stallion stood in a makeshift corral, a fine animal, dark bay, clean legs, alert eyes. Worth every penny of $40 and then some. Silas walked the fence line, examining the horse. That's when he heard it. A voice, thin, cracked, coming from somewhere behind the supply shed. "Don't buy the horse." He stopped, turned. "Buy me instead." She was there in the narrow shade between the shed wall and a stack of feed sacks. A girl, no, a woman, small-framed, but not a child. Her dress was a rag, sun-faded cotton that might have been blue once. Her black hair hung loose and tangled past her shoulders. Her skin was brown from the sun, but beneath the dust and the bruises her features were unmistakable. Chinese. One of the railroad families, maybe, or what was left of them. A chain ran from her left ankle to an iron stake driven into the ground, the kind you'd use to tether a goat. She looked up at him with dark eyes that held no tears. She was past tears, past begging too, or should have been. But she wasn't. "I can work," she said. "I can cook. I can clean. I know medicine herbs roots. I can fix what's wrong with your cattle." Her voice was steady now, gaining strength like a fire catching. "I heard you talking. Your animals are sick. I know what it is. I've seen it before." Silas stared at her. His hands hung loose at his sides. Something in his chest cracked, not pity, not yet. Something older. Something that felt like looking in a mirror. He turned to Griff, who had followed him out. "What the hell is this?" Griff spat tobacco juice into the dirt. She belongs to Edgar Holt. You know Holt runs the mining operation up at Silver Fork. He brought her in 3 weeks ago, said her daddy owed him for passage and board. Daddy died in a shaft collapse, so Holt took the girl instead. Said she's collateral till the debt's paid." "How much is the debt?" "Holt says $200. $200 for a dead man's debt." "That's what Holt says. Ain't nobody argued with him yet." Silas looked back at the woman. She hadn't moved. She held his gaze with a kind of desperate dignity, the look of someone who had decided to bet everything on a stranger because there was nothing left to lose. "What's your name?" he asked. "May," she said. Then quieter, "May Lynn, but they call me May." "May." He said it like he was testing the weight of it. "You said you know medicine." "My mother was a healer. She taught me everything before she died." "And you think you know what's killing my cattle? You said their bellies swell, they stop eating, then they drop." She tilted her head. "It's the water. There's a plant, yellow star thistle. It grows near streams in summer. Cattle eat it when the grass dries out. It poisons them slow." Silas felt something shift in his gut. He'd moved his herd to the creek pasture 3 weeks ago, right when the dying started. "How do you know that?" "Because my father worked ranches before the railroad, before Holt, before everything." Her voice didn't waver. "I grew up watching animals die and learning how to stop it." Griff laughed from behind them. "She's been telling that story to every man who walks through here. Don't mean it's true." "It's true," May said, and she looked only at Silas. "Move your cattle away from the creek. Find the yellow flowers and burn them. I can make a tonic from charcoal and slippery elm that'll draw the poison out of the ones still alive. But you have to do it soon." Silas stood there in the crushing heat, sweat rolling down his neck, his $32 suddenly feeling like the most important decision he'd ever make. A horse to sell for medicine he might not find, or a woman who said she was the medicine. He turned to Griff. "How much does Holt want for her?" Griff's eyebrows shot up. "You serious? How much?" He said 200, but he ain't been back in 3 weeks. I've been feeding her out of my own stock, and I ain't a charitable man, Silas. You give me $40. I'll give you the girl and tell Holt she ran off. I've got 32. Griff's eyes narrowed. "Then throw in that rifle." Silas's hand went to the Winchester on his back. His brother's rifle, Jesse's rifle. The last thing Jesse ever touched before the bullet found him at Shiloh. Silas had carried it across 3 states, through mud, through grief, through years of silence so heavy it felt like drowning. May watched him. She saw his hand tighten on the strap. She saw the pain cross his face like a shadow. "You don't have to," she said quietly. Something about the way she said it, not begging, not manipulating, just giving him permission to walk away, made Silas's throat close. He unslung the rifle, held it for a moment, then laid it on the fence rail. "Done," he said. Griff grabbed the rifle, checked the action, and grinned. "Pleasure doing business." He pulled a key from his pocket and tossed it to Silas. "Padlock's on the stake. She's your problem now. Silas caught the key. He walked to where May sat and knelt in the dust beside her. Up close, he could see the ring of raw skin where the chain had rubbed her ankle bloody. He could see the faded bruises on her arms. He could see that her hands, despite everything, were steady. He unlocked the chain. It fell away with a sound like a sigh. May didn't move. She sat perfectly still, staring at her free ankle, as if she didn't trust it. "Can you walk?" Silas asked. "Yes." "Then let's go." She stood. Her legs shook, but she did not fall. She followed him through the yard, past the stallion she'd told him not to buy, past Griff, who was already admiring the Winchester, and out into the blazing street. Silas's horse waited at the rail, flicking its tail against the flies. He untied the reins, then turned to May. "You ride behind me. Hold on to the saddle, not to me. We've got 4 hours to the ranch." She nodded once. He mounted, then reached down a hand to help her up. She hesitated just a heartbeat, then took it. Her grip was stronger than he expected. They rode out of Dalton Creek without looking back. The trail wound through dry hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper. The sun was merciless, and the only sound was hooves on hard-packed earth and the occasional cry of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. May sat rigid behind the saddle, her hands gripping the cantle so tight her knuckles were white. She kept space between her body and his back, deliberate, practiced. She knew how to share space with a man without touching him. She'd learned that the hard way. After an hour, Silas spoke without turning his head. "You hungry?" "Yes." He reined in beside a flat rock, dismounted, and pulled a cloth bundle from the saddlebag. Jerky, a hard biscuit, a canteen of water. He set it on the rock and stepped back. May climbed down, awkward, wincing when her raw ankle hit the ground, and sat on the opposite end of the rock. She ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who had learned that food could be taken away at any moment. Silas leaned against a boulder and drank from his own canteen. He didn't watch her eat. He kept his eyes on the horizon, giving her the only thing he knew how to give right now: space. After a while, May said, "You lost someone." It wasn't a question. Silas's jaw worked. "My brother, Jesse. Civil War." "How long ago?" 25 years. Feels like yesterday." May set down the jerky. "My father died in a mine collapse 18 months ago. Feels like yesterday, too." They looked at each other, then not as strangers, not as buyer and bought, but as two people carrying weight that would have broken most folks a long time ago. "I'm not going to hurt you," Silas said. "I want you to know that." "I know," May said. "That's why I'm still sitting here." "How do you know?" She tilted her head, a ghost of something almost like a smile at the corner of her mouth. "Because a man who gives up his brother's rifle for a stranger doesn't have cruelty in him. He has grief. And grief I understand." Silas looked away. His throat felt thick. He picked up the canteen, took another drink, and said, "We should move." They reached the ranch as the sun was dropping toward the mountains, painting everything in shades of copper and amber. The spread was modest: a cabin, a barn, 2 corrals, and a stretch of pasture that ran down to a creek lined with cottonwoods. Silas dismounted and tied the horse. He pointed to the cabin. "Doors open. Kitchen's to the left. There's a pump out back for water." He paused. "There's a room used to be my brother's. It's yours." May stood in the yard looking at the cabin, then at the corrals, then at the pasture where the remaining cattle grazed near the creek. "Those are the sick ones?" she asked, pointing. "The ones still standing, yeah." She started walking, not toward the cabin, toward the cattle. "Where are you?" "Show me the creek," she said over her shoulder. "Now, before dark." Silas blinked. Then he followed her. At the creek bank, May knelt and examined the plants growing along the water's edge. Her hands moved quick and sure, pulling stems, snapping leaves, smelling roots. Within minutes, she had a handful of bright yellow flowers. "This," she said, holding them up. Yellow star thistle. It's everywhere along this bank. Your cattle have been grazing on it for weeks. You were right. I told you I was right. She stood brushing dirt from her knees. Tomorrow we move the herd to the upper pasture. Tonight I need charcoal any kind. Wood ash. And if you have willow bark or slippery elm, bring it. Silas stared at her. This woman chained to a stake 2 hours ago was standing in his pasture, giving him orders like she owned the place. He almost smiled. Almost. I've got charcoal in the barn, he said. Willow bark, I don't know. I'll find it. There's willow trees along this creek. The bark is medicine. She was already moving toward the tree line, her bare feet quick on the grass, despite the raw ankle. Build a fire in the yard. A big one. I need to boil water. Yes, ma'am, Silas said, and this time the corner of his mouth did turn up just slightly. May glanced back at him. For a moment something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or the memory of what it felt like to be listened to. She turned away and disappeared into the willows. That night the yard smelled like a medicine camp. May had stripped bark-crushed charcoal and boiled everything in Silas's biggest pot until the liquid turned black as coffee. She strained it through a cloth, poured it into bottles, and by lantern light she walked among the cattle. Silas watched from the fence rail as she approached the sickest cow, a red and white heifer that hadn't stood in 2 days. May knelt beside her, one hand on the animal's neck, the other tilting the bottle against its mouth. She whispered something not English. Cantonese, maybe. Soft musical steady. The heifer drank. May moved to the next one, and the next. Silas didn't offer to help. He could see that she didn't need it. She moved with a certainty that came from somewhere deep knowledge passed down through hands and voices that no longer existed except in her. When she finally came back to the yard, her dress was stained. Her hands were black with charcoal, and she was trembling with exhaustion. 3 of them are bad, she said. Real bad. But if the tonic holds, they might turn by morning. Silas handed her a cup of water. She drank it standing, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. There's food inside, he said. Stew. It ain't good, but it's hot. You cooked? If you can call it that. May followed him inside. The cabin was spare, but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a stove shelves, lined with jars and cans. She sat down, and he set a bowl in front of her. She tasted it. Her face was carefully neutral. It's terrible, she said. Silas sat across from her. I know. Tomorrow I'll cook. I won't argue. They ate in silence for a while. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, a coyote howled somewhere far off in the hills, and the cattle shifted in the darkness. The room is through that door, Silas said, nodding to the left. There's a bolt on the inside. You can lock it. May looked at the door, then at him. You put a bolt on the inside. Built it myself. This afternoon before I left for town. Wasn't sure what I'd find, but... He stopped, rubbed the back of his neck. Figured whoever ended up in that room might want to know they could close a door and have it stay closed. May set her spoon down. She stared at him for a long time, her dark eyes searching his face for the lie, the angle, the hidden cost. She had been reading men's faces her whole life. She knew what hunger looked like, what greed looked like, what ownership looked like. She didn't see any of that in Silas Reed's face. She saw exhaustion. She saw grief. And she saw something so rare she almost didn't recognize it. Respect. Thank you, she said. The words came out rough, like she hadn't used them in a long time. Silas nodded once. He stood, took his bowl to the basin, and walked to the door. I sleep in the barn most nights, he said. Cooler out there in summer. You need anything, holler? He put his hat on and stepped outside. The screen door banged shut behind him. May sat alone at the table. The fire popped. The bolt on the bedroom door gleamed in the lamplight, new brass freshly screwed into old wood. She got up, walked into the room and closed the door. Her hand found the bolt. She slid it shut. The click was small, but it echoed through her whole body. She pressed her forehead against the door and stood there breathing. In, out, in, out. For 3 weeks, she had slept chained to a stake in the dirt, curled against feed sacks, listening to men drink and curse and break things in the dark. Before that, Holt's mining camp. Before that, the laundry. Before that, years she couldn't think about without her hands starting to shake. And now, a door with a lock. A bed she didn't have to share. A man who walked away without being asked. May didn't cry. She had taught herself not to years ago because crying made noise and noise brought attention, and attention brought pain. But something moved in her chest. Heavy old tectonic like ice cracking on a river in spring. She sat on the edge of the bed. She touched the clean quilt with her fingertips. She lay down. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maylin slept without dreaming of chains. Before dawn, Silas woke to the sound of hooves. He came out of the barn fast, his hand reaching for a rifle that wasn't there anymore. Old habit, phantom weight. It was the red and white heifer, standing, shaky thin but standing, nosing at the grass with a weak but stubborn hunger. May stood at the corral fence, arms folded, watching. She turned, May said without looking at him. The other two are drinking water. Silas walked to the fence and stood beside her. They watched the cattle together in the gray pre-dawn light, the sky just beginning to blush along the eastern ridge. I reckon I owe you an apology, he said. For what? I came to town thinking the best I could hope for was a horse. He paused, and his voice dropped rough and honest. I was wrong. May turned her head and looked at him. The first light caught in her eyes, dark, clear, alive. You didn't buy me, Mr. Reed, she said, her voice quiet but firm as iron. You bought my freedom. What I do with it is mine to decide. Silas held her gaze. Then he tipped his hat. Yes, ma'am, he said. The sun broke over the ridge. The cattle stirred. Somewhere in the cottonwoods, a meadowlark began to sing, high, bright, and unafraid. And in the space between two strangers standing at a fence, something began. Not love. Not yet. Not trust. Not fully. But the fragile, stubborn beginning of both, like the first green shoot pushing through cracked earth after a long dry season. It didn't have a name yet, but it was alive. 3 days changed everything on the Reed Ranch. May moved through the place like a woman rebuilding herself, one task at a time. She rose before dawn. She had the fire-lit water boiling and coffee brewed before Silas even pulled his boots on in the barn. By the second morning, she had reorganized his kitchen jars, labeled herbs hung to dry from the ceiling beams, a pot of congee simmering on the stove that made the whole cabin smell like ginger and home. Silas came in that morning, stopped in the doorway, and stared at the bowl she set on the table. What is that? Rice porridge. Eat it. I usually just have stale biscuits and bad coffee. I know, I saw your pantry. She sat across from him and picked up her own spoon. Eat. Silas sat down. He tasted it. Something crossed his face, not quite surprise, not quite pain. More like a man remembering that food could taste like someone gave a damn. It's good, he said quietly. I know, May said. He looked up. For a half-second he thought he saw the ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Then it was gone quick as a bird, and she was back to eating. By the third day, every sick cow was on its feet. May had dosed them twice daily with her charcoal tonic, walking the pasture in the early heat with a bucket and a steady hand. She showed Silas how to spot the yellow star thistle, how to pull it by the roots, how to burn the patches clean. You do this every summer, she told him, crouching beside a clump of the bright yellow flowers near the creek bank. Every year it comes back. You don't let it go to seed. How long does it take to clear? Years. But you keep at it. She yanked a fistful of roots from the dirt and tossed them into the burn pile. That's how you fight anything that's trying to kill what's yours. Silas watched her hands, quick, sure, stained with earth. He thought about the chain on her ankle. the raw skin that was only now starting to scab over. Those same hands had been locked to a stake 3 days ago. Now they were saving his ranch. May. What? Thank you. She didn't look up. Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted my dumplings. That night, Silas woke screaming. It happened sometimes, less than it used to, more than he'd admit. The dream was always the same. Shiloh. Rain. Mud so thick it swallowed the dead. Jesse's face, young and pale, mouth open like he was trying to say something, but the words had already left him. And Silas holding him, screaming for a medic who never came, his hands red and useless and shaking. He came awake, gasping, drenched in sweat, his fists clenched around the horse blanket he slept on in the barn. His breath came in ragged bursts, his heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to break free. Mr. Reed. He spun. May stood in the barn doorway, a lantern in her hand, her hair loose around her shoulders. She wore his old shirt and a pair of trousers she'd hemmed with twine. Her face was calm, but her eyes were wide and careful. "Don't come closer," he said. His voice was raw, broken. "I heard you from inside." "I said don't." He stopped. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and breathed. In, out, in, out. May didn't move. She didn't come closer. She didn't leave. She just stood there, the lantern light steady in her hand, and waited. After a long time, Silas said, "It's the war." "I know. It doesn't stop." "I know that too." He looked at her. His eyes were wet, but he didn't wipe them. "How do you know?" May set the lantern on a hay bale and sat down on a stool near the door. "Still far. Still safe. Because I wake up the same way. Different dream. Same feeling." She folded her hands in her lap. "At Holt's camp, I learned to scream into my pillow so nobody would hear. If they heard, they came. And when they came..." She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "You don't need the details." "No," Silas said. "I don't." They sat in the barn 10 feet apart, breathing the same dark air. Somewhere outside, an owl called. The cattle shifted in their sleep. "My mother used to make a tea," May said, "chrysanthemum and jujube. She said it calms the spirit when the body remembers what the mind wants to forget." She paused. "I don't have chrysanthemum, but I can find something close." "You don't have to fix me, May." "I'm not fixing you. I'm making tea." She stood and picked up the lantern. At the doorway, she stopped. "You're allowed to scream, Mr. Reed. Just know that if you do, someone hears you now, and she's not going to come in here to hurt you." She left. The barn fell dark again. Silas sat in the silence for a long time. Then he lay back down, pressed his palm flat against his chest, where the old bullet scar ridged beneath his shirt, and closed his eyes. He didn't dream again that night. A week in, Silas knew they needed supplies. Things May couldn't forage or improvise: flour nails, kerosene, a new axe handle. He'd been putting off the trip to town. He knew what Dalton Creek was. He knew what people would say. "I need to ride into town," he told May over breakfast. "I'll be back by evening." "I'll go with you." "That's not a good idea." "Why?" He set his coffee down. "Because people in that town aren't kind, May. Not to strangers. Not to..." He stopped. "Not to Chinese." She said it flat, without self-pity. A fact. Like weather. Like gravity. "I'm not going to lie to you about it." "Good. Don't." She stood and cleared her bowl. "I need willow bark and slippery elm from the general store. I also need to see if they carry dried ginger. And I want to look that man Griff in the eye and make sure he knows I'm standing on my own feet." Silas studied her. She met his gaze, chin up, shoulders back. "All right," he said. "But you stay close to me." "I don't need a bodyguard, Mr. Reed." "No, ma'am, but I could use the company." They rode into Dalton Creek just past noon. The town was small and mean, A single dirt street lined with false-fronted buildings baking in the July sun. Miners, drifters, and ranch hands moved along the boardwalks. A group of men sat outside the saloon passing a bottle. Silas tied the horse at the general store and helped May down. She straightened her dress, still the same faded rag from the trading post washed and mended, but unmistakably poor, and walked toward the store with her head high. Inside the store was cramped and dim. A woman stood behind the counter. 50-ish gray-streaked hair pulled back tight, wire spectacles perched on her nose. Ruth Calloway. She owned the place since her husband died of fever 2 years back. Ran it alone. Took no guff from anyone. She looked up when they entered. Her eyes went to Silas, then to May. Her expression hardened. "Silas Reed," she said. "What can I do for you?" "Got a list." He set a piece of paper on the counter. "And the lady needs some supplies, too. Herbs, dried ginger if you've got it." Ruth looked at May, not with hatred, something colder. Suspicion, judgment. The look of a woman who had heard stories and believed them. "I don't carry Chinese herbs," Ruth said. "This is a general store, not an apothecary." May stepped forward. Her voice was polite, but didn't bend. "Dried ginger isn't Chinese, ma'am. It grows in Jamaica. You've got it in the third jar on the top shelf behind you between the cinnamon and the cloves." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "How would you know what's on my shelves?" "Because I can read your labels from here, and because I can smell it." May met her gaze. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Mrs. Calloway. I'm here to buy ginger. Same as anyone." The silence in the store felt like a held breath. Ruth stared at May. May didn't blink. Silas stood to the side, his hand resting easy on the counter. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to. Ruth turned, pulled the jar from the shelf, and set it on the counter with a thud. 2 bits. "Thank you," May said, and placed the coins down. They gathered the rest of the supplies in silence. As Silas loaded the saddlebags outside, a voice called from across the street. "Hey, Reed." A man named Clancy, big red-faced, worked at the freight office, crossed the dirt road with 2 others behind him. He was grinning, but it wasn't friendly. "Heard you picked up a little China girl from Griff's place. That true?" Silas tightened a strap on the saddlebag. Didn't turn around. "What's it to you, Clancy?" "Just curious. Man like you all alone up on that ridge must get lonely." Clancy laughed. The men behind him laughed too. "How much she set you back? Griff give you a discount." Silas turned then. Slow. His face was stone. "You want to say that again?" Clancy's grin faltered. He knew Silas Reed. Everybody did. Quiet man, kept to himself. But they also knew he'd been in the war. They knew about Shiloh. They knew the stories about what a man learns to do when he's been in the mud with the dying. "Just making conversation," Clancy said, holding up his hands. "Then make it about something else." Clancy backed off. But as Silas turned back to the horse, he heard one of the others mutter, "Holt ain't gonna like this. That girl's his property." Silas's hands stopped. His whole body went still. May had come out of the store. She heard it too. Her face didn't change, but her hand found the edge of the saddlebag and gripped it hard. They rode out of town without speaking. 2 miles up the trail, May broke the silence. "Holt knows." "Yeah." "He'll come." "Yeah." "What are you going to do?" Silas didn't answer for a long time. The horse climbed the ridge trail, hooves kicking dust in the dry heat. "Whatever I have to," he said. 4 days later, a boy appeared at the ranch. May found him first, curled up in the feed shed, skinny as a rail, covered in dust and bruises. He couldn't have been more than 12. Brown skin, dark hair, eyes that darted like a cornered animal. She knelt in the shed doorway. "Hey, you hungry?" The boy scrambled back against the wall. "Don't hit me." "Nobody's going to hit you. What's your name?" "Tommy." "Where'd you come from, Tommy?" "Holt's camp." The words came out in a rush. "I worked the kitchen. They beat me when I dropped a pot, so I ran." May's face went white. She knew that kitchen. She knew those men. How long have you been running? 3 days, maybe 4. His voice cracked. I saw the ranch from the ridge, smelled food. I'm sorry. I'll leave. You're not leaving. May stood and held out her hand. Come inside. When Silas came in from the pasture, he found May at the stove and a strange boy sitting at his table eating beans like his life depended on it, which Silas reckoned it probably did. Who's this? Tommy. He's from Holt's camp. Silas looked at the boy, at the bruises on his arms, at the way he hunched over his food like he expected someone to snatch the plate away. How old are you, son? 12, maybe 13? My mama didn't keep track. Where's your mama? Dead, 4 years now. Your daddy? Tommy shrugged. Never met him. Mama said he was a miner, American. She was from Sonora. That's all I know. Silas pulled out a chair and sat down. He looked at May. She looked at him. Something passed between them, not a word, not a signal, just an understanding. You can stay, Silas said, long as you want. There's work here if you're willing. Tommy stopped eating. He looked up with those wide, wary eyes. What kind of work? Honest kind. Feeding cattle. Fixing fences. Mucking stalls. Silas leaned back. I'll pay you fair. 2 meals a day and a place to sleep. Nobody lays a hand on you. That's the deal. Tommy blinked. His lip trembled, but he caught it. Bit down hard. 12 years old and already too proud to cry in front of strangers. Yes, sir, he said. May turned back to the stove, and Silas saw her wipe her eyes with the back of her wrist. Quick. Quiet. Like she'd had a lot of practice hiding that too. Tommy earned his keep fast. He was small, but tireless up before dawn, hauling water, splitting kindling, chasing chickens back into the coop. He followed Silas around like a shadow, watching everything, asking questions in a rapid-fire mix of English and Spanish. How come you sleep in the barn, Mr. Reed? Because I like it. That ain't a real answer. It's the one you're getting. But with May, Tommy was different. Softer. He'd sit at the kitchen table while she prepared meals and watch her hands as she chopped vegetables and ground herbs. He asked about the plants she dried on the ceiling beams, and she told him each one's name, what it did, how her mother had taught her. My mama used to make tea from a bush called gobernadora, Tommy said one afternoon. Said it cured everything. Creosote bush, May said, nodding. She was right. It's good for stomach pain, infection, swelling. She handed him a mortar and pestle. Here, grind this willow bark for me, small pieces. Tommy took it with both hands. You teaching me medicine? I'm teaching you to grind bark. Medicine comes later. Is that a promise? May looked at him. This skinny, bruised, motherless boy with his wide eyes and his desperate need to be useful. Something ached in her chest, the phantom of a life she might have had if the world had been different. That's a promise, she said. The trouble came 10 days after Tommy arrived. Silas and May were in town again, more supplies, a new axe-handle salt for preserving. Tommy stayed at the ranch armed with a list of chores and strict instructions not to burn the cabin down. They were loading the wagon outside Ruth Calloway's store when a commotion erupted from inside. Shouting, a child screaming. Then Ruth's voice high and sharp with panic. Somebody help, please, she can't breathe. Silas moved first, pushing through the door. Ruth was on the floor behind the counter, holding a girl of about 7 in her arms. The child's face was swollen and red, her lips turning blue. She clawed at her throat, gasping, her tiny body convulsing. She ate something, Ruth cried, her spectacles askew, her face white with terror. From the shelf, I don't know what she's choking, she can't breathe. May was already beside them. She dropped to her knees and took the child's face in her hands. What did she eat? Show me. Ruth pointed to a shattered jar on the floor. Dried berries, dark purple, almost black. Pokeweed berries, May said. Her voice was sharp-focused. No fear, just certainty. They're poison. How many did she eat? I don't know, a handful. Oh God, please. May turned to Silas. I need salt. A lot of it. And warm water. Now. Silas grabbed a sack of salt from the shelf and a pitcher of water from the back. May mixed it fast, her hands moving with a precision that stopped every voice in the room. Hold her up, May told Ruth. Tilt her forward. Ruth obeyed, too terrified to argue. May poured the salt water into the child's mouth a little at a time, firm and steady. Swallow, she said. Her voice carried an authority that made grown men in the store step back. Swallow, little one, that's it. The girl gagged, coughed, then vomited hard onto the floor, purple-stained bile, half-digested berries, everything her small body needed to purge. Again, May said. She gave the child more salt water. The girl threw up again, and again. Each time May held her steady, wiped her mouth, spoke to her in a low, calm voice. Good girl, brave girl, you're going to be fine. After the third purge, the child's breathing eased. The blue left her lips. Her swollen face began to soften. She whimpered and reached for her mother. Ruth grabbed her daughter and held her so tight the child squeaked. Tears streamed down Ruth's face, dripping onto the girl's hair. She rocked her back and forth, sobbing. Then she looked up at May. How did you? My mother taught me, May said. She was kneeling in the mess on the floor, her dress ruined, her hands stained purple. She didn't seem to notice. Keep her drinking water, small sips. She'll be sick for a day, maybe two, but she'll live. Ruth's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I don't... She swallowed hard. Thank you. May nodded and stood. Her knees were shaking now, the adrenaline fading, the exhaustion rushing in. She gripped the counter edge to steady herself. Silas was right there. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that if she swayed, he'd catch her. She felt him there, solid, steady, present, and she let herself breathe. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast in a small town. A Chinese woman had just saved Ruth Calloway's daughter. Folks didn't know what to do with that. Some stared, some whispered. A few of the miners shook their heads and walked away. But Ruth Calloway came to the door of her store, her daughter clinging to her neck, and she looked out at the street with red-rimmed eyes. This woman saved my Sarah's life, she said. Her voice was raw, but loud enough to carry. Anybody got a problem with that can take their business elsewhere. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Silas loaded the last of the supplies. He helped May onto the wagon seat. As they pulled away, May's hands were still shaking in her lap. She pressed them flat against her thighs. You all right? Silas asked. I'm fine. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. They rode in silence for a mile. Then May said very quietly, The last time I helped someone at Holt's camp, he beat me for wasting supplies. Silas's grip tightened on the reins until his knuckles turned white. He didn't speak. He couldn't trust his voice. So, when you ask if I'm all right? May continued, her eyes on the road ahead. I'm shaking because this is the first time I helped someone and nobody punished me for it. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. He sat there for a moment, staring at the mountains. Then he turned to her. May. What? Nobody's ever going to punish you for being good. Not while I'm breathing. She looked at him. Her dark eyes glistened. She didn't speak. She just nodded once, sharp and quick, and turned away. He clicked the reins. The wagon rolled on. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the Sierras, an old man walked out of the tree line carrying a cloth bundle and a walking stick. Tommy saw him first. Mr. Reed, somebody's coming. Silas reached for his hip, then remembered. No rifle. No pistol either. He'd traded the Winchester and hadn't replaced it. He grabbed the axe from the chopping block and walked toward the fence. The old man was Chinese. Small, weathered, his white beard thin and wispy. He walked with a slow dignity that said he'd covered a lot of ground and wasn't in a hurry to cover more. His clothes were worn but clean, a quilted jacket, cloth shoes, a wide straw hat that had seen better decades. May came out of the cabin. She stopped on the porch. Her hand went to her mouth. "Chen Shushu," she whispered. The old man looked up. His face cracked into 1,000 wrinkles, and his eyes, bright, sharp, ancient, found hers. "Mei Lin," he said, "I have been looking for you for a very long time." May ran. She ran off the porch and across the yard, and she grabbed the old man so hard he staggered. She buried her face in his shoulder and said something in Cantonese, fast, broken sobbing, and the old man held her with one arm and patted her back with a hand that trembled with age and relief. Silas stood with the axe at his side watching. Tommy stood behind him, eyes wide. "Who is that?" Tommy whispered. "I don't know," Silas said. "But she does." Inside over tea, and the last of the evening's rice, old Chen told his story. He spoke English slowly but clearly, a man who had learned the language one hard word at a time, over 40 years in America. "I knew Mei Lin's father," he said, his gnarled hands wrapped around the cup. "We worked the railroad together, the Central Pacific. 1869. I was young then, strong." He smiled faintly. "Not so much now." "How did you find me?" May asked. She sat close to him, her hand on his arm like she was afraid he might vanish. "I heard stories. A Chinese girl at Griff's trading post. A rancher who paid for her freedom. Stories travel Mei Lin, especially about us." He looked at Silas. "You are the rancher." "I am." Chen studied him with those sharp old eyes. "You gave up your brother's rifle for her." "Word travels," Silas said. "It does." Chen took a slow sip of tea. Then he set the cup down, and his face changed. The warmth drained away, replaced by something hard and serious. "I did not come only to find Mei Lin," he said. "I came to warn you." He looked at May. "Edgar Holt is not just a mining boss. He is a man who buys debts, Chinese debts. He collects them like other men collect horses." His voice dropped. "And he does not forget what he believes belongs to him." "I don't belong to him," May said. Her voice was iron. "No, you do not. But Holt does not agree." Chen paused. "There is something else. Something about your father." May went still. The room went still. "Your father did not die in a shaft collapse, Mei Lin." The words landed like stones in deep water. "What?" May's voice was barely audible. Chen's old eyes filled with pain. "The shaft was sound. I inspected it myself 2 days before. Your father had discovered that Holt was cheating the Chinese workers, paying them half what he promised, then charging double for food and tools. Your father kept records, a ledger. He was going to take it to the territorial authorities." May's hands were shaking, and Holt found out. "Holt ordered the timbers cut, made it look like an accident. I was not there that day, or I would have gone in after him." Chen's voice broke. He pressed his hand flat on the table to steady himself. "I have carried this truth for 18 months. I could not prove it. I still cannot. But you deserve to know." May stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. She walked to the door, gripped the frame, and pressed her forehead against the wood. Her shoulders heaved. No sound, no tears. Just a body trying to hold a fury so old and so deep it threatened to crack her open. Silas watched her. He didn't go to her. He knew this moment wasn't his. Tommy sat frozen at the table, his eyes wide, his hands gripping his knees. After a long time, May turned around. Her eyes were dry, her voice was flat and cold. "Where is the ledger?" Chen shook his head. "Your father hid it, before the collapse. I do not know where." "Then I'll find it." "Mei Lin, I will find it." She looked at Silas. "And when I do, Edgar Holt is going to pay for what he did to my father." Silas held her gaze. He saw something in her eyes he recognized. Not grief anymore, but purpose. The same thing that had kept him upright through Shiloh, through Jesse's death, through years of silence and frozen ground. A reason to keep going. "Then we'll find it together," he said. Outside, the coyotes had started up their voices, threading through the dark hills like a warning. The summer night pressed close and warm against the cabin walls. The fire burned low. Old Chen sat with his eyes closed, his tea going cold. His weathered face carrying the weight of secrets kept too long. And in the small kitchen of a ranch that should have gone under months ago, 3 broken people and 1 bruised boy sat together in the lamplight, bound by something stronger than blood or debt or chains. A choice to stay, a choice to fight, a choice to believe that the truth once found could set more than one person free. May picked up her cup. Her hands were steady now. "Tell me everything you remember about the mine," she said. And Old Chen began to talk. Old Chen talked for 2 hours that night. He drew maps in charcoal on the back of a flour sack, the mine entrance, the tunnels, the shaft where May's father had worked his last day. His memory was sharp as a blade cutting through 18 months of silence, with details that made May grip the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. "Your father's station was the 3rd tunnel on the left." Chen set his finger tracing the charcoal lines. "He kept the ledger hidden there behind a loose timber near the ventilation shaft. He told me once, only once, that if anything happened to him, I should find it." "But you didn't," May said. Not an accusation. A fact. Chen's hand stilled on the map. After the collapse, Holt sealed the 3rd tunnel, said it was unstable, posted armed men at the entrance for 2 weeks. He paused. "By the time they left, I was too afraid to go back. And now I am too old to be afraid." He looked at her with those ancient eyes. "But I am not too old to be ashamed." May put her hand over his. "You came. That's enough." "It is not enough," Chen said quietly. "But it is what I have." Silas had been listening from his chair by the stove, his arms folded, his face unreadable. Now he leaned forward. "The mine. Is it still sealed?" "The main shaft is open. Holt still runs a crew there, smaller now, mostly Chinese men who cannot leave because they owe him money." Chen's voice hardened. "The 3rd tunnel I do not know. It has been 18 months. "How far is it from here?" "Half a day's ride. Maybe less if you push hard." Silas looked at May. "You know I have to say this." "Then say it." "It's dangerous. Holt's got men. He's got the sheriff in his pocket. If we ride up to that mine and start pulling timbers apart, someone's going to notice." "I know. And if we find that ledger, it's your father's word against the richest man in the territory. A dead Chinese man's word." May flinched, just barely. But Silas saw it. "I'm not saying it to be cruel," he said. "I'm saying it because you need to know what we're walking into." "I know exactly what we're walking into." May stood. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. "My father was murdered, Silas. Not by accident, not by fate, by a man who decided his life was worth less than a page of numbers. That ledger is proof. And I don't care if every judge in Nevada throws it out. I want it. I want to hold it in my hands. I want to see my father's handwriting one more time." The cabin went quiet. The fire popped. Tommy sat in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest, watching everything with those wide, dark eyes. Silas stood. "Then we go at dawn." "Not we," May said. "I go. You stay with Tommy and Chen." "Like hell." "Silas, like hell." He stepped closer. Not threatening, just immovable. "You're not riding into Holt's territory alone. That's not negotiable. If something happens to you, if something happens to me, you ride back here, you take Tommy and Chen, and you keep going north until you hit Oregon. There are people up there who don't ask questions." He held her gaze. "But nothing's going to happen to me. Because nothing's going to happen to you. Not anymore." May stared at him. Her throat worked. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him this wasn't his fight, that she'd been surviving on her own long before she met him, that she didn't need a man with a dead brother's guilt riding beside her into danger. But she didn't say any of that, because standing there in the lamplight looking at his stubborn, scarred, immovable face, she realized something that terrified her more than Edgar Holt ever could. She didn't want to do this alone. "Fine," she said. "Dawn." Tommy spoke up from the corner. "I'm coming too." "No," Silas and May said at the same time. "I know that mine," Tommy said. He stood up, all 4'0" of him, his chin jutted out. "I worked Holt's camp for 2 years. I know the tunnels. I know the shifts. I know when the guards change and which ones drink on duty." He looked at Silas. "You need me." Silas opened his mouth to refuse, then he closed it. He looked at May. She looked at Tommy. "He's right," she said quietly. "He's 12. And he knows more about that mine than either of us." Silas rubbed his face with both hands. "God help me," he muttered. He pointed at Tommy. "You do exactly what I say. Exactly. No arguments, no heroics. You understand?" Tommy nodded fast. "Yes, sir." "And if I tell you to run, you run. You don't look back." "Yes, sir." "All right." Silas grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. "I'm going to check the horses. Everybody get some sleep. It's going to be a long day." He walked out into the warm dark. The screen door banged behind him. Old Chen watched him go. Then he turned to May. "He is a good man, Maylin." "I know. Do not wait too long to tell him." May didn't answer. She cleared the cups from the table, banked the fire, and went to her room. She closed the door. She slid the bolt. She pressed her back against the wood and breathed. Then she knelt on the floor, reached under the bed, and pulled out a small cloth bundle she'd hidden there the first week. Inside was a single item, a jade pendant cracked down the middle, strung on a frayed cotton cord. Her mother's. The only thing she'd managed to keep through everything. Every camp, every chain, every hand that took everything else. She held it against her chest and closed her eyes. "Baba," she whispered, "I'm coming." They left before first light. Chen stayed at the ranch, too old for the ride, too stubborn to admit it, until May told him the cattle needed tending and someone had to guard the cabin. He accepted the excuse with a knowing nod and pressed a small pouch of dried herbs into her hand. "For pain," he said. "In case." The ride took 4 hours. Tommy sat behind Silas on the big roan. May rode the brown mare she'd been training, steady now, responsive, a different animal from the skittish thing that had bolted in Silas's first week. Tommy talked the whole way, nervous energy pouring out of him in a stream of information about the mine guard rotations, tunnel layouts, which foremen were cruel and which were just indifferent. "There's a man named Briggs who runs the day shift," Tommy said. "Big fella missing 3 fingers on his left hand. He's mean but lazy. Falls asleep after lunch every day in the supply shack." "What about the 3rd tunnel?" Silas asked. "Boarded up. Has been since I got there. Holt told everyone it was going to collapse, but I heard the Chinese workers talking at night. They said there was nothing wrong with that tunnel. Said Holt sealed it because there was something in there he didn't want found." May's hands tightened on the reins. She said nothing. They left the horses tied in a draw 1/2 mile from the mine and went the rest of the way on foot. Tommy led, quick and low, weaving through the brush, with the ease of a boy who'd spent 2 years learning how to move without being seen. The mine sat in a shallow canyon, a scarred gash in the hillside surrounded by equipment shacks and piles of tailings that spilled down the slope like gray wounds. A handful of workers moved near the main entrance, but the midday heat had driven most of them into the shade. "Briggs is in the supply shack," Tommy whispered, peering through the brush. "See doors closed. He's out." "Where's the 3rd tunnel?" Silas asked. Tommy pointed to the left side of the canyon, where a secondary entrance was blocked by heavy timbers nailed across the opening. "There, behind those boards." "Guards?" "Not usually. Nobody goes near it. They think it's cursed." Tommy paused. The Chinese workers won't go near it because they say the spirits of the dead are still inside. May's jaw tightened. My father's spirit. May, Silas started. Let's move. They circled wide using the tailings piles for cover and reached the boarded entrance without being spotted. Silas examined the timbers. They were old, weathered, nailed in place with rusted spikes. I can pull these, he said, but it's going to make noise. Then make it fast, May said. She positioned herself at the corner of the entrance, watching the camp. Tommy crouched beside her, his small body tense as a coiled spring. Silas gripped the first timber and pulled. The nails screamed against the wood. He froze. Listened. Nothing from the camp. He pulled again. The board came free with a crack that echoed off the canyon walls. Faster, May hissed. He ripped 3 more boards away, enough to squeeze through. The tunnel mouth gaped before them, dark and cool, and smelling of earth and something older, stale air, undisturbed for 18 months. I go first, May said. May. My father. My tunnel. My choice. She took the lantern from Silas's hand, struck the match, and stepped into the dark. The tunnel was narrow and low. May had to duck, but she moved forward with a certainty that came from somewhere beyond memory. The walls pressed close. The air grew thick. Her lantern threw jumping shadows that made the timbers seem to breathe. Silas followed close behind, one hand on the wall, his shoulders nearly brushing both sides. He hated enclosed spaces. Had since Shiloh, since the night he'd spent in a collapsed trench with Jesse's body cooling beside him. His breath shortened. His pulse hammered. You all right? May asked without turning. Keep moving. She counted the side passages. First tunnel. Second. Third. She stopped. The passage opened slightly here, widening into a small work area. Tools still lay where they'd been dropped. Picks, shovels, a dented tin cup. Dust covered everything like a gray shroud. May moved to the far wall, running her hands along the timbers. Chen said behind a loose timber near the ventilation shaft. She felt along each one, pressing, pulling. Here, Silas, here! One timber shifted when she pushed it. Silas stepped past her and gripped the beam with both hands. He pulled. It groaned, shifted, and came free in a shower of dirt and small stones. Behind it was a hole in the rock wall, barely wider than a man's arm. May reached inside. Her fingers touched cloth. She pulled. A bundle came out, wrapped in oilskin tied with twine. Small, light, but the weight of it seemed to press the air out of the tunnel. May's hands were shaking as she untied the twine. Inside the oilskin was a leather-bound book roughly the size of a hymnal. She opened it. Pages and pages of columns. Numbers, names, dates. Written in neat, precise characters, Chinese and English side by side. Her father's handwriting. She recognized it instantly. The careful strokes, the way he crossed his T's, the small flourish on every capital letter, a habit he'd picked up from an Irish foreman who'd taught him English on the railroad. This is it, she breathed. Every worker's name, what Holt promised them, what he actually paid, the difference. She flipped pages, her eyes scanning fast. He was stealing thousands, Silas. Thousands. From men who couldn't read their own contracts. Can you prove it? It's all here. Every number, every date, every lie. She closed the book and pressed it against her chest, her arms wrapped around it like she was holding her father. Her eyes closed. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Silas put his hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She leaned into it. Let's get out of here, he said. They emerged from the tunnel into blinding daylight. Tommy was there, bouncing on his feet, his face tight with panic. We gotta go. Now. Briggs woke up. He's walking this way. Silas shoved the boards roughly back into place. Not perfect, not even close. Anyone looking would see they'd been disturbed. But there was no time. They ran. Low, fast, through the brush, down the slope to the draw where the horses waited. May clutched the ledger to her chest. Silas lifted Tommy onto the roan and mounted behind him. May swung onto the mare. They rode hard. Dust kicked up behind them in a cloud that anyone on the ridge could have seen. But nobody shouted. No shots rang out. They made the main trail and pushed the horses to a gallop. 2 miles out, May pulled up alongside Silas. "We did it," she said, breathless, her face flushed and alive in a way he'd never seen. "Not yet," Silas said. "Not till that ledger's in someone's hands who can do something about it. Who the sheriff belongs to, Holt. Then we go over his head. U.S. Marshal, Federal Territory Court. That's Carson City, 3 days' ride. Then we'd better start thinking about who watches the ranch while we're gone." They pushed the horses on. But the victory that burned in May's chest already had a shadow falling across it. Because when they crested the last ridge above the ranch, Tommy saw it first. "Mr. Reed," the boy's voice went thin. "Mr. Reed, look." Riders, 6 of them, already at the ranch, horses tied to the fence, men moving between the barn and the cabin. And standing in the yard straight-backed and still as a rattlesnake before it strikes was Edgar Holt. Silas pulled the roan to a halt. May stopped beside him. They sat on the ridge looking down. "He didn't wait," May said. Her voice was flat, dead calm, the kind of calm that came just before something broke. "No, he didn't. Chen is down there." Silas's jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped. "Yeah. What do we do?" Silas looked at the riders. 6 men armed. He had no rifle. 1 pistol he'd borrowed from a neighbor last week, 6 rounds. May had a skinning knife. Tommy had nothing but guts and fast legs. "Tommy," Silas said quietly, "I need you to do something for me. Anything. Ride to town. Find Ruth Calloway. Tell her what's happening. Tell her to send anyone who'll listen." He paused. "Can you do that?" "I can ride Mr. Reed." "I know you can." Silas swung down from the saddle and lifted Tommy to sit in front. He handed the boy the reins. "Push him hard. Don't stop." Tommy looked at May. She reached over and squeezed his hand once. "Go, little brother." The boy's eyes went bright and wet. Then he set his jaw, kicked the horse, and flew down the north trail toward Dalton Creek. Silas mounted behind May on the brown mare. "Ride down slow. Let them see us coming. And then I'm going to have a conversation with Edgar Holt. With 6 rounds and no rifle." Didn't say it was going to be a polite conversation. They rode down the slope side by side, or as close to it as one horse allowed. Silas walked. May rode. They came into the yard like they'd been out checking fences, easy and unhurried, though May's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Edgar Holt stood in the center of the yard. He was exactly as old Chen had described, tall, lean, silver-haired, dressed in a dark vest and clean white shirt, like a man on his way to church. His boots were polished. His hands were clean. His face carried the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. Behind him, 6 men fanned out, rough-armed, watching. One of them held old Chen by the arm. The old man's lip was split. Blood stained his white beard. May saw Chen. Her whole body went rigid. Silas felt it through the saddle. "Easy," he murmured. Holt smiled. It was a pleasant smile, the kind a banker gives you before he forecloses. "Mr. Reed, I've been hoping we'd meet." Silas stopped the mare 10 feet from Holt. He dismounted slowly. May stayed in the saddle, the ledger hidden beneath her shirt pressed flat against her stomach. "You're on my land," Silas said. "That's not something I take kindly to." "Apologies for the intrusion. I'm a businessman, Mr. Reed. I like to resolve disputes quickly." Holt clasped his hands behind his back. "You have something of mine." "I don't have anything of yours." "The girl." Holt's eyes flicked to May, not with lust, with ownership, the way a man looks at a horse that's wandered off his property. "She's bound to me by contract. Her father's debt. $200 witnessed and signed. Her father's dead. Debts don't die with the debtor, Mr. Reed. Surely you know that. Silas stepped forward. I know that a man who chains a woman to a stake like an animal doesn't get to talk about contracts. Holt's smile didn't waver. Mr. Dalton's methods were crude. I didn't authorize them. But the debt remains. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket and held it up. I have the contract right here. Legal. Binding. Recognized by the territorial court. Court that you paid for. Court that upholds the law, Mr. Reed. Same law that protects your ranch, your cattle, your property rights. Holt tilted his head. You're a man who respects property. I can see that. So you understand my position. May swung down from the horse. She walked forward until she stood beside Silas, her chin up, her back straight. Your contract is a lie, she said. My father never signed anything. Holt's eyes settled on her. Your father made his mark. An X witnessed by 2 men. Standard practice for illiterate. My father could read and write in 2 languages. May's voice cut like a blade. English and Chinese. He would never have made a mark. He would have signed his name. Show me the contract. A flicker crossed Holt's face. Just a flicker. Gone in a heartbeat. But May saw it, and Silas saw it. The contract is not your concern, Holt said smoothly. It's a matter for the courts. Then take it to court, May said. And while you're there, explain how a perfectly sound tunnel collapsed on top of 3 men. Explain how the timbers were cut. Explain why you sealed that tunnel for 18 months. The yard went silent. Holt's men shifted. One of them put his hand on his holster. Holt's smile finally died. His face went flat and cold like a lake freezing over. You've been listening to stories from old men with failing memories. I've been reading my father's handwriting. May didn't blink. Every dollar you stole, every worker you cheated, every lie you told. It's all written down, Mr. Holt, in a book you spent 18 months trying to find. Holt's composure cracked. Just for a second. His eyes went to May's midsection where the slight bulk of the ledger pressed against her shirt. He saw it. She saw him see it. Give me the book, Holt said. His voice dropped the pleasant pretense. Give it to me now and I'll forgive the debt. Walk away clean, all of you. No. Miss, you don't understand your position. I have 6 men. Your rancher has 1 gun. The sheriff answers to me. There is no scenario in which you win. There's one, Silas said. He hadn't moved. His hand rested on his hip near the pistol, casual as a man leaning on a fence post. The scenario where you leave my land right now and never come back. Or what, you'll shoot me. Holt laughed. In front of witnesses. That's murder, Mr. Reed. They'll hang you. Maybe, but you'll still be dead, and that ledger will still exist. Silas's voice was quiet, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. See, the thing about a man with nothing left to lose is that threats don't work on him the way you think they do. You can't take my ranch, it's not worth taking. You can't take my brother, he's already dead. And you can't take her. He nodded toward May. Because she doesn't belong to anyone. Least of all you. Holt stared at him. For the first time, something moved behind those cold eyes. Not fear. Calculation. The rapid mathematics of a man reassessing his odds. Briggs, Holt said without turning. Take the girl. The big man with 3 fingers missing stepped forward. Silas drew the pistol. Fast. Smooth. The click of the hammer was the loudest sound in the yard. One more step, Silas said. Briggs stopped. He looked at Holt. Holt looked at Silas. The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Then a sound broke through from the north trail. Hooves, not one horse. Many. Coming fast. Tommy came riding over the ridge on Silas's roan, and behind him, behind this 12-year-old boy on a horse too big for him, rode Ruth Calloway on her dead husband's bay gelding. And behind Ruth came 4 more riders. Ranchers. Townspeople. Men and women Silas barely knew, and certainly never asked for help. One of them carried a shotgun. Another carried a rope, Ruth pulled up at the gate, her face flushed, her gray hair loose from its pins. She took one look at the scene. 6 armed men, Holt in the center, Silas with his pistol drawn, May standing her ground, and she swung down from the saddle. "Edgar Holt," she said, and her voice carried across the yard like a church bell. "My Sarah nearly died 2 weeks ago. That woman right there saved her life with her bare hands and a cup of salt water. You want to take her? You go through me first." One of the ranchers, a thick-armed man named Garrett, who ran cattle south of town, stepped forward. "Through me too." Another rider. "And me." Holt looked at the growing crowd. His men looked at each other. The arithmetic had changed. 6 against 2 was one thing. 6 against 10 with witnesses in broad daylight, that was something else entirely. "This isn't over," Holt said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at May. "I always collect what's owed." "My father paid his debt with his life," May said. "You're the one who owes now." Holt turned. He walked to his horse. His men followed, mounting up in a ragged line. Briggs was the last, glaring at Silas, with a look that promised the kind of trouble that doesn't announce itself. They rode out. Dust settled behind them like a curtain falling. Old Chen sagged against the porch rail. May ran to him, touching his face, examining the split lip. "Chen Shushu, are you all right?" "I am tougher than I look, Mei Lin." He coughed. "Which is good, because I look terrible." She laughed. It came out wet and broken and surprised, like a sound she'd forgotten she could make. Silas holstered the pistol. His hand was shaking. He shoved it in his pocket before anyone could see. Ruth walked up to him. She stood there for a moment, then nodded. "You've got some nerve, Reed. 1 gun against 6 men. Wasn't my best plan. Wasn't any plan at all, far as I could tell." She looked at May, who was helping Chen inside. "That woman's got more spine than half the men in this territory." "Yes, ma'am. She does." Ruth studied him with those sharp eyes behind her wire spectacles. "You love her." Silas didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because saying it out loud here now, with dust still settling and his hands still trembling, felt like opening a door he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. "You don't have to answer," Ruth said. "I've got eyes." She turned to go, then stopped. "Holt's not done. You know that." "I know. He'll come back. Not with men this time. With paper. Lawyers. The sheriff." "I know that too." "Then you need to move fast. Get that ledger to Carson City. Get it in front of someone Holt can't buy." She pulled a card from her pocket and pressed it into his hand. "My late husband's attorney, Daniel Webb. He's honest, which in Nevada means he's broke and stubborn, but he'll fight for what's right." Silas looked at the card, then at Ruth. "Why are you helping us?" Ruth's face softened. Just a fraction. "Because that woman knelt on my dirty floor and saved my daughter's life without asking for a single thing in return. And because I spent too many years watching men like Holt take whatever they wanted from whoever couldn't stop them." She straightened her hat. "I'm done watching." She mounted up. The other riders followed. Tommy came running from the barn, breathless. "Did I do good, mister?" "Reed." Silas looked at the boy, this scrawny, bruised, fearless kid who had ridden alone to town and brought back an army. "You did real good, son." Tommy beamed. Then his face crumbled, and he threw his arms around Silas's waist and held on like the world was going to blow away. Silas froze. His arms hung at his sides. He hadn't been hugged by anyone since Jesse. Since before the war. Slowly, his hand came up and rested on the back of Tommy's head. He didn't speak. He just stood there, one hand on a boy who needed a father, and let something inside his chest crack open that he'd been holding shut for 25 years. May watched from the porch. She held the ledger in one hand and old Chen's arm in the other. She saw Silas's face the way it broke and rebuilt itself in the space of a breath. and she understood something she'd been circling around since the first night in this cabin. He wasn't just saving her. She was saving him too. They were saving each other. And the boy. And the old man. All of them pulling each other upright one day at a time, one choice at a time, building something out of nothing but stubbornness and grace. That night, after Chen was bandaged and fed, after Tommy fell asleep on his cot, with his boots still on, after the lanterns burned low and the summer night pressed warm and close against the cabin walls, May sat at the table with the ledger open before her. Silas sat across from her. He watched her trace her father's handwriting with her fingertip page after page, her lips moving silently. May. She looked up. Her eyes were red but dry. We need to talk about Carson City. I know. It's 3 days there. 3 days back. Holt will know we're gone. He'll come for the ranch. I know. Chen can't fight. Tommy's a child, and I'm not leaving you here alone. May closed the ledger. She folded her hands on top of it and looked at him with an expression that was equal parts iron and tenderness. Then we both go, she said, and we take the boy and the old man with us. Leave the ranch empty. The ranch is wood and nails, Silas. It can be rebuilt. She paused. We can't. He stared at her across the table. The lamplight caught the jade pendant at her throat, her mother's crack down the middle held together by a frayed cord and sheer will. When did you get so brave? He asked. I was always brave, she said. I just didn't have anywhere safe to show it. Silas reached across the table. He put his hand on top of hers, on top of the ledger, on top of her father's truth. Carson City, he said. Day after tomorrow. Day after tomorrow. They sat that way for a long time. Two people with their hands joined over a dead man's words, making a plan that could save them or destroy everything they'd built. The summer night hummed around them. Crickets whined the soft breathing of a sleeping boy, and an old man dreaming in a language that was not the language of this land, but was the language of home. May didn't pull her hand away, neither did Silas. And somewhere in the hills riding hard toward the county seat, Edgar Holt was already writing a letter to the territorial sheriff requesting an arrest warrant for a rancher named Silas Reed on charges of theft, harboring fugitives, and the willful destruction of mining property. The warrant would be signed by morning. They left before the stars faded. May rode the brown mare with the ledger strapped to her body, beneath her shirt, flat against her ribs, bound with a strip of cloth so tight she could feel her father's words pressing against her skin with every breath. Old Chen sat behind Tommy on the roan, his thin arms wrapped around the boy's waist, his jaw set against the pain of riding at his age. Silas led on foot for the first mile, walking ahead to check the trail, the borrowed pistol on his hip, and his eyes on every shadow. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say that the silence didn't already carry. 2 miles from the ranch, Silas stopped. He stood in the trail, head tilted, listening. What is it? May whispered. Riders. Behind us. Maybe a mile back. Tommy twisted in the saddle. How many? Can't tell. More than 2. Silas grabbed the roan's bridle and pulled both horses off the trail into a dry wash. Stay low. Don't move. They pressed against the bank of the wash, the horses' noses held firm. May crouched beside Silas, her hand on the mare's neck, feeling the animal's pulse hammer beneath her palm. Or maybe that was her own. The riders passed above them on the trail. 3 men, moving fast, heading north toward the ranch. Holt's men, Tommy breathed. They'll find it empty, Silas said. That buys us time. But when they don't find us there, they'll turn around and start looking. Then we don't take the main road, May said. Silas looked at her. The mountain pass adds a full day. Better a day late than dead on the road. He didn't argue. They climbed out of the wash and cut west toward the high country, leaving the main trail behind. The mountain pass was brutal. The horses struggled on the rocky switchbacks, and old Chen's face turned gray with exhaustion by midday. They stopped in a narrow canyon to rest, and May brewed a quick tea from the herbs Chen had given her, pressing the cup into his trembling hands. Drink, she said. I am slowing you down, Mei Lin. You're not. I am an old man on a young person's mission. Leave me. Come back when it's done. No. May knelt in front of him and took his face in her hands. You carried my father's truth for 18 months. You walked across the territory to find me. I am not leaving you on the side of a mountain. Chen's eyes glistened. He drank the tea without another word. Tommy appeared from around a boulder, scrambling fast. Mr. Reed, smoke. Silas climbed to the ridge and looked south. A column of smoke rose from the direction of the ranch. Thick, black. Not a campfire. May came up beside him. She didn't need to ask. They're burning it, she said. Silas's face was stone. His hands hung at his sides, fists clenched so tight the tendons stood out like ropes. Everything he'd built, everything Jesse had helped him start, the cabin, the barn, the corrals he'd repaired with May's help, the door with the brass bolt. Silas. May's voice was low and steady. Look at me. He didn't move. His eyes stayed on the smoke. Silas, look at me. He turned. His eyes were dry, but something in them had cracked open a wound that went all the way down to the boy who'd held his brother in the mud at Shiloh and lost everything for the first time. May took his hand. She held it the way he'd held hers that night in the barn, not tight but firm. An anchor. Wood and nails, she said. Remember. His throat worked. He swallowed hard. Wood and nails. We can rebuild. But first we finish this. He looked at her hand in his, then at her face, then at the smoke one last time. Let's move, he said. They pushed through the pass and descended into the Carson Valley as the sun was dropping. They made camp in a stand of cottonwoods near a creek, and for the first time since leaving the ranch, they ate. Jerky hard biscuits, dried apples. Tommy fell asleep against a tree trunk before he finished chewing. Chen sat with his back against a rock. His eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady. May covered him with a blanket and checked his pulse. Weak but regular. He needs rest, she told Silas. Real rest. Not another day in the saddle. We're half a day from Carson City. Can he make it? He'll have to. She paused. But I'm worried about his heart. The altitude. The stress. Silas sat down beside her. Close. Their shoulders almost touching. And you? How are you? I'm fine. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She looked at him sideways. I watched my father's workplace burn from a mountaintop today. I've been writing for 14 hours with a dead man's ledger strapped to my chest. And the man who murdered my father is trying to have us arrested. She paused. But I'm sitting next to someone who gave up his brother's rifle for a stranger, and that stranger turned out to be the most stubborn woman in Nevada. So yes, I'm fine. Silas almost smiled. Not quite, but close. Most stubborn woman in Nevada. Don't push it. Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am. They sat in the dark, listening to the creek and the crickets and Tommy's soft snoring. After a while, May leaned her head against Silas's shoulder. He didn't move. He barely breathed. Then slowly he tilted his head until it rested against hers. Silas. Yeah. When this is over, if we get the ledger to the right people, if Holt goes down, what happens, then... What do you mean? I mean, what happens to us? He was quiet for a long time. What do you want to happen? I asked you first. Yeah, well, I'm not good at this part. Neither am I. Another silence. The creek murmured. The stars wheeled overhead. I want to rebuild the cabin, Silas said finally. Bigger this time. 2 rooms, maybe 3. A real kitchen, not that closet I was cooking in. He paused. And I want you in it. If you want to be. May lifted her head and looked at him. His face was half shadow, half starlight, and the honesty in it was almost more than she could bear. I want to be, she said. Yeah, yeah. He turned to her. She turned to him. And in the dark beside a creek in the Carson Valley, with an old man sleeping and a boy dreaming and a ledger full of truth pressed against her heart, May kissed Silas Reed. It was not a dramatic kiss. Not the kind that shakes the earth or stops the wind. It was gentle, brief, tasting of dust and dried apples and something deeper. The cautious, terrified, unstoppable beginning of two people choosing each other with their eyes wide open. When she pulled back, Silas's hand was trembling against her cheek. "I haven't," he started. "It's been a long time since—" "I know," she said. "Me too. I don't know how to do this right." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out." He rested his forehead against hers. They breathed together. In, out, in, out. "Carson City," he said. "Carson City," she said. They reached the city by noon the next day. Carson City was the biggest thing Tommy had ever seen. Two-story buildings, a proper courthouse, wagons and carriages, and people everywhere. He sat on the horse with his mouth open, turning his head like a weather vane. "Close your mouth, Tommy," May said. "You'll catch flies. There's so many people. Welcome to civilization." They found Daniel Webb's office on a side street near the courthouse, a cramped, dusty room above a barber shop. Webb himself was a small man with ink-stained fingers, wire spectacles thicker than Ruth Calloway's, and a suit that had been pressed sometime in the previous decade. He looked up from a mountain of papers when they walked in. His eyes went from Silas to May to old Chen, who was leaning on Tommy's shoulder, to the ledger May placed on his desk. "Ruth Calloway sent us," Silas said. "She said you were honest." "Ruth said that." Webb blinked. "That's the nicest thing she's ever said about me." He picked up the ledger and opened it. His eyebrows climbed his forehead as he turned pages. "Where did you get this?" "From a sealed tunnel in Edgar Holt's mine," May said. "My father wrote it. He documented every payment Holt made to his Chinese workers and every payment Holt promised but didn't deliver. The discrepancy is in the thousands." Webb's fingers moved across the columns. He pulled out a magnifying glass. "This is meticulous. Dates, names, amounts, both English and Chinese." He looked up. "Your father was a careful man." "He was a dead man," May said. "Holt killed him for writing that book." Webb set the magnifying glass down. "That's a serious accusation, miss." "My name is Mei Lin, and I have a witness." She gestured to old Chen. "This man inspected the tunnel 2 days before the collapse. It was sound. Holt had the timbers cut to bury my father and the evidence." Webb leaned back in his chair and studied Chen. "You'd testify to that under oath in front of a territorial judge." Chen straightened. Despite his exhaustion, despite the split lip and the bruises, and the 70 years pressing down on his shoulders, his voice was clear. "I would." "You understand what that means? Holt will come after you. Lawyers' threats worse." "I have spent 18 months being afraid," Chen said. "I am finished with it." Webb took off his spectacles and cleaned them on his sleeve. He put them back on and looked at Silas. "And you? What's your involvement?" "I bought her freedom from a trading post for $32 and a Winchester rifle." "Holt claims she's his property. I disagree." "The Chinese Exclusion Act makes things complicated for your friend here. She has limited legal standing in territorial court." "Then find a way to expand it," May said. "My father built your railroad, Mr. Webb. He blasted tunnels through mountains so people in this territory could ship their silver and ride their trains. He didn't have legal standing either. But he had the truth. And so do I." Webb stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled a small, tired, stubborn smile that said he'd been waiting a long time for someone to walk through his door with a fight worth having. "I'll need 3 days," he said, "to review the ledger, prepare affidavits, and file with the territorial court. I can request an emergency injunction against Holt freeze his assets, halt his mining operations pending investigation. He held up a hand. But I won't lie to you. This is David against Goliath. Holt has money connections and the sheriff. We have a ledger, an old man's testimony, and whatever God gives us. We have the truth, May said. In my experience, truth needs a good lawyer. Webb stood and extended his hand. Lucky for you, I'm cheap, and I'm angry. Ruth Calloway saved my practice when nobody else would give me the time of day. If she trusts you, I trust you. Silas shook his hand. What do we do while you work? Stay out of sight. Holt has people in Carson City. If he knows you're here before I file, he'll find a way to stop it. Webb looked at Tommy. Who's the boy? Tommy, Silas said. He's with us. How old's he? 12. Webb shook his head. A rancher, a Chinese healer, an old man, and a 12-year-old boy. Against the richest mine owner in the territory. He gathered the ledger and his papers. This is either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the dumbest. Probably both. They found a boarding house on the edge of town run by a Mexican woman named Dolores, who asked no questions and charged 2 bits a night. 2 rooms, May and Chen in one, Silas and Tommy in the other. Clean beds, thin walls, and a shared kitchen that smelled like chili and lard. Tommy fell asleep within minutes. Chen took longer, but the tea and the rest did their work, and by evening his color had returned. May stood in the hallway between the 2 rooms. Silas stood in his doorway. They looked at each other across 3 feet of worn floorboard. You should sleep, Silas said. So should you. Neither moved. Silas, if Webb files that injunction and the judge grants it, Holt loses everything. His mine, his money, his power. I know. A man like that doesn't just accept losing. I know that too. He'll try to destroy the ledger, or destroy us. Silas leaned against the doorframe. Then we don't give him the chance. How? Webb's got the ledger now. It's in a lawyer's hands. Even if something happens to us, the evidence exists. He paused. But nothing's going to happen to us. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She almost smiled. Almost. Good night, Silas. Good night, May. She closed her door. He closed his. The hallway fell silent. At 3 a.m, the sound of breaking glass brought Silas out of bed like a gunshot. He was on his feet before his eyes were open, the pistol in his hand, Tommy scrambling behind him. Stay here, he hissed. He opened the door. The hallway was dark. The sound had come from downstairs. Another crash. Then a voice low rough carrying the unmistakable authority of a badge. Silas Reed. This is Sheriff Dunn of Ormsby County. You are under arrest by order of the Territorial Court. Come down with your hands up or we'll come up and get you. Silas's blood went cold. He looked across the hall. May's door opened. She stood there barefoot, her eyes wide. The warrant, she whispered. Holt got it signed. Heavy boots on the stairs. At least 3 men. Coming up fast. May grabbed Silas's arm. The back window. Kitchen roof. We can... No. Silas's voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. If I run, it proves their case. They'll call me a fugitive and everything we've done is finished. Silas. Take Tommy. Take Chen. Go to Webb's office. Tell him what happened. He took her hand and pressed something into it, the folded card Ruth Calloway had given him. Don't come for me. Get the injunction filed. I'm not leaving you. May. He gripped her shoulders. His eyes burned into hers. Your father died to get that truth out. Don't let it die with me in a jail cell. Finish this. For him. For all of them. Her face crumbled. For one terrible second, she looked like the woman he'd found chained to a stake in the dirt, broken, helpless, small. Then, something shifted. Her jaw set. Her shoulders squared. The woman who'd stared down Edgar Holt in his own yard, who'd saved a child on a store floor, who'd ridden through a mountain pass with a dead man's ledger against her heart, that woman came back. I'll get you out, she said. I swear it. I know you will. The boots reached the top of the stairs. Silas turned, holstered the pistol, and walked toward them with his hands raised. I'm Silas Reed, he said. I'm unarmed. Don't shoot. Two deputies grabbed him. They shoved him against the wall, cuffed his wrists behind his back. Sheriff Dunn appeared a heavy man with a star on his chest, and the look of someone doing a job he wasn't proud of. Silas Reed, you're under arrest for theft, destruction of mining property, and harboring a fugitive indentured servant. That woman is not a servant. She's a free person. That's for the court to decide. Dunn looked past him toward the rooms. Where's the girl? Silas met his eyes. Steady. Unwavering. What girl? Dunn stared at him. Then he jerked his head at the deputies. Search the rooms. They searched. They found Tommy hiding under a bed shaking. They found Chen sitting upright in a chair, his hands folded, his face serene as a temple statue. They did not find May. Because May was already gone out the back window, across the kitchen roof, and into the dark streets of Carson City, with her bare feet silent on the packed dirt and her mother's cracked jade pendant swinging against her chest, and a dead man's truth burning inside her like a fire that no sheriff, no warrant, and no amount of Edgar Holt's money could ever put out. She ran toward Webb's office. She did not look back. May hammered on Daniel Webb's door until her fists ached. 3 a.m. Dark street, her bare feet bleeding from the run across town. She didn't care. She hit the door again. A lamp flickered behind the window. Shuffling footsteps. The lock turned. Webb opened the door in his nightshirt, spectacles, crooked hair wild. He took one look at her face and stepped aside without a word. They arrested him, May said. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, but her voice was controlled. Tight, like a wire about to snap. Sheriff Dunn, Holt's warrant. They took him 20 minutes ago. Webb was already moving. He pulled on trousers, grabbed his coat, shoved his feet into boots. On what charges? Theft, destruction of mining property, harboring a fugitive indentured servant. She spat the last words. That's me. I'm the fugitive. Where's the ledger? You have it. You took it yesterday. Webb crossed to his desk, opened a locked drawer, and pulled out the leather-bound book. He held it up. Still here. That's the only thing that matters right now. The only thing that matters is getting Silas out of that jail. May, listen to me. Webb put the ledger down and gripped her shoulders. His eyes were sharp behind those thick lenses. If we file the injunction at first light, we can get a hearing before Judge Harlan by noon. Harlan is the one man in this territory Holt cannot buy. He's a federal appointee, Civil War veteran, hates corruption the way most men hate rattlesnakes. And if Holt gets to Silas before noon, Webb's face tightened. Then we pray the sheriff follows protocol. I don't pray, Mr. Webb, I act. Then act by letting me do my job. He sat down at his desk, pulled out paper, and began writing, fast, precise. The pen scratching across the page like a man who'd been waiting his whole career for a case worth losing sleep over. I need Chen's testimony. Written. Signed. Can the old man write? He can write in Chinese. I'll translate. Good. Bring him here. Now. May ran back to the boarding house. She found Chen awake, dressed, sitting on the edge of his bed with his hands folded. Tommy sat beside him, wide-eyed and trembling. They took Mr. Reed, Tommy said. His voice cracked. I tried to stop them. They pushed me down. I know. May knelt in front of him and took his face in her hands. Listen to me, Tommy. I need you to be brave for a little while longer. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. Good. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me. What are you going to do? I'm going to get him back. She helped Chen to his feet, and they walked through the dark streets to Webb's office. The old man moved slowly, but his eyes were clear, and when Webb handed him paper and ink, his hand was steady. Chen wrote for an hour. Page after page in careful Chinese characters, everything he'd witnessed, everything he knew about the tunnel, the sabotaged timbers the workers Holt had cheated and silenced. May translated each page into English writing in the margin in her father's style, neat, precise, the handwriting of a woman taught by a man who believed his daughter's words mattered. By dawn, Webb had a stack of documents 2 inches thick. Affidavits, testimony, financial analysis of the ledger, a formal request for an emergency injunction, and a motion to dismiss all charges against Silas Reed. "This is either going to work," Webb said, straightening his tie in a cracked mirror, "or it's going to end my career. Possibly both." "It's going to work," May said. "You sound very certain." "I am certain, because the alternative is unacceptable." Webb looked at her. Then he picked up the stack of papers, tucked them under his arm, and opened the door. "Courthouse opens at 8. Judge Harlan takes his bench at 9. We need to be first on the docket." "What about Silas?" "The sheriff has to bring him before the judge within 24 hours. That's the law. Even Holt can't change that." Webb paused. "But Holt can make those 24 hours very uncomfortable." May's jaw clenched. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The fury in her eyes said everything. They reached the courthouse at 7:30. A crowd had already gathered. Word had traveled. It always did in Carson City when Edgar Holt was involved. Miners, merchants, lawyers, drifters, all milling around the courthouse steps like spectators at a prize fight. And there, standing at the top of the steps in his dark vest and polished boots, was Edgar Holt himself. He looked rested, composed. A man who had orchestrated everything and was now here to watch it play out. He saw May. His eyes locked onto hers across the crowded steps. "Miss May Lynn," he said. His voice carried. "I'm surprised you're still in the city. Most fugitives have the sense to run." May climbed the steps. Webb tried to hold her arm, but she shook him off. She walked straight up to Holt and stopped 3 feet from his face. "I'm not running," she said. "I'm filing." Holt's smile flickered. "Filing. An emergency injunction against your mining operations. A formal accusation of fraud, labor theft, and murder." She held his gaze. "My father's murder." The crowd went quiet. People on the steps stopped moving. Even the pigeons on the courthouse roof seemed to hold still. Holt's composure held, but something shifted behind his eyes. A recalculation. "You have no standing in this court. The Exclusion Act." "The Exclusion Act restricts immigration," Webb said, stepping up beside May. "It does not strip existing residents of their right to petition for justice. Your employee was a legal resident with documented work history on the Central Pacific Railroad. His daughter has standing to bring a civil claim on his behalf." He held up the stack of papers. "And I have a ledger full of evidence that says you've been robbing Chinese workers blind for the better part of a decade." Holt looked at Webb like a man noticing a mosquito for the first time. "Daniel Webb, I thought you'd retired. I was waiting for a case worth waking up for." The courtroom doors opened at 9 sharp. Judge Samuel Harlan took the bench, a tall, white-haired man with a face like weathered granite and eyes that had seen Bull Run Antietam and 30 years of territorial law. He did not smile. He did not make small talk. He picked up his gavel and brought the room to order with a single crack. "I understand we have an emergency petition," Harlan said. "Mr. Webb." Webb stood. "Your Honor, I represent May Lin, daughter of Lin Wei Chang, deceased laborer at the Silver Fork Mine, owned and operated by Mr. Edgar Holt. I am filing a petition for emergency injunction against Mr. Holt's mining operations, based on evidence of systematic labor fraud, and a separate motion to dismiss all charges against Mr. Silas Reed, who has been arrested on a warrant obtained by Mr. Holt through the county sheriff." "Bold claims," Harlan said. "What evidence?" Webb placed the ledger on the judge's bench. This ledger was written by the deceased Lin Wei Chang. It documents payments promised and payments delivered to Chinese workers at Silver Fork between 1883 and 1886. The discrepancy totals approximately $12,000. A murmur swept the courtroom. $12,000 was a fortune, enough to buy half of Dalton Creek. Harlan opened the ledger. He studied it for a long time, turning pages, running his finger along the columns. His face gave nothing away. "Mr. Holt," the judge said. "Your response." Holt's attorney, a slick man from Reno named Cartwright, stood. "Your Honor, this ledger is unverified. It could have been written by anyone. The deceased was an illiterate laborer who, my father was not illiterate." May's voice rang out from the gallery. She stood. Every head in the room turned. He read and wrote in English and Chinese. He was taught English by an Irish foreman named Patrick O'Brien on the Central Pacific Railroad in 1869. He kept records because he believed that numbers don't lie even when men do. Harlan looked at her. "Miss, you are not yet recognized by this court." "Then recognize me, Your Honor, because I am the only person in this room who can verify that handwriting." Webb stood. "Your Honor, I request that Miss May Lin be called as a witness to authenticate the document." Cartwright objected. Harlan overruled him. May walked to the witness stand. Her bare feet were still bleeding. Her dress was the same faded rag she'd worn since the trading post. She had no shoes, no money, no status in the eyes of the law. But she had her father's truth in her voice, and she was not afraid. "Miss May Lin," Webb said, "can you identify the handwriting in this ledger? It's my father's. I would recognize it anywhere." He crossed his T's with a small upward stroke, a habit he learned from Mr. O'Brien. He wrote his sevens with a European crossbar, and every capital letter has a slight flourish on the first stroke. She pointed to a page. "There, and there, and there." "Can anyone else have written this?" "No. My father developed this style over 20 years. It is as unique as a fingerprint." "And the content?" "Every entry matches what my father told me about his work at Silver Fork. The names of the workers, the amounts they were promised, the amounts they received. The difference went into Edgar Holt's pocket." Cartwright jumped up. "Your Honor, this is hearsay from the daughter of a dead man. She has no proof that—" "I have a witness," May said. She looked at the gallery. Chen Shushu. Old Chen stood. He walked to the front of the courtroom with the slow dignity of a man who had carried a secret too long and was finally ready to set it down. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore his oath. "I inspected the third tunnel at Silver Fork on July the 14th, 1886, Chen said. His English was careful and clear. The timbers were sound. The supports were intact. I documented my inspection in a report I gave to the mine foreman, Mr. Briggs." He paused. 2 days later, the tunnel collapsed. 3 men died. One of them was Lin Wei Chang. "And your conclusion?" Webb asked. "The timbers were cut, deliberately. The collapse was not an accident. It was murder." The courtroom erupted. Harlan slammed his gavel 3 times. "Order, order in this court." Holt was on his feet. His composure was gone. "This is absurd. This old man is senile. He has no proof." "Sit down, Mr. Holt," Harlan said, and his voice was iron. "Or I will have you removed." Holt sat. His hands gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Harlan turned to Chen. "Sir, you say you filed an inspection report. Can you produce it?" Chen hesitated. "I gave it to Briggs. I do not know if I can produce it." Every head turned. A voice from the back of the courtroom. A big man missing 3 fingers on his left hand, standing in the doorway with his hat in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. Briggs. May's heart stopped. She looked at Silas's enemy, the man who had stepped forward to grab her at the ranch, the man who worked for Holt, and she didn't understand. Briggs walked down the aisle. The crowd parted. He stopped in front of the judge's bench and laid the paper down. "That's the inspection report," Briggs said. His voice was rough, ashamed. "I kept it. Holt told me to burn it, but I didn't." He swallowed hard. "I've done a lot of things I ain't proud of, Your Honor. But I was there the day Holt gave the order to cut those timbers. I saw it done. And I've been carrying that for 18 months, same as the old man." Holt shot to his feet. "Briggs, you lying." "I ain't lying." Briggs turned on Holt, his face red, his voice breaking. I lost 3 fingers in your mine, Holt. 3 fingers and whatever was left of my conscience. I'm done. I'm done carrying your dirt. The courtroom was chaos. Harlan's gavel cracked like rifle shots. Cartwright was shouting objections. Holt was white-faced and shaking. May sat in the witness chair, her hands gripping the armrests, tears streaming down her face. Not of grief, not of fear, but of something so deep and so long buried that it didn't have a name. Only a feeling. The feeling of a dead man's voice finally being heard. It took Harlan 5 minutes to restore order. When he did, his face was carved from stone. Mr. Holt, he said, based on the evidence presented, the ledger, the inspection report, and the corroborating testimony of 2 independent witnesses, I am granting the emergency injunction. Your mining operations at Silver Fork are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full criminal investigation. He turned to the sheriff, who stood against the wall looking like a man who wished he'd chosen a different profession. Sheriff Dunn, you will release Silas Reed from custody immediately. All charges are dismissed. Your Honor, Cartwright started. Furthermore, Harlan continued, his voice rising. I am referring the matter of the tunnel collapse to the U.S. Marshal's Office for investigation as a potential criminal homicide. Mr. Holt, you are not to leave Ormsby County until further notice. Holt stood. His face was a mask. His eyes found May across the courtroom, and for the first time she saw something in them she had never expected to see. Fear. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Mr. Holt, Judge Harlan said. It is. They brought Silas out of the jail at noon. He walked through the door squinting against the sunlight, his wrists red from the cuffs, his shirt torn at the collar, a bruise darkening his left cheekbone where someone had hit him during the night. May was waiting. She stood on the courthouse steps with Chen on one side and Tommy on the other, and Daniel Webb behind them, clutching his papers like a man who'd just won the biggest case of his life and couldn't quite believe it. Silas stopped. He looked at May. She looked at him. You filed the injunction, he said. I filed the injunction. Charges dropped. All of them. Holt. Under investigation. Can't leave the county. She paused. Briggs turned on him, testified, brought the inspection report. Silas blinked. Briggs, 3-finger Briggs. Turns out even Holt's men have a limit. Silas stood there on the jail steps, battered and tired and blinking in the Nevada sun, and he laughed. It came from deep in his belly, rough, raw, startled, like a sound he'd forgotten he could make. He laughed until his eyes watered, until May started laughing too, until Tommy was grinning, and even old Chen was shaking his head with that ancient knowing smile. Then Silas walked down the steps and stopped in front of May. He took her face in his hands gently, carefully, like she was something precious and unbreakable at the same time, and he kissed her. Right there, in front of the courthouse, in front of the crowd, in front of God and Nevada, and anyone else who cared to watch. When he pulled back, May's eyes were shining. I thought you weren't good at this part, she said. I'm learning. Tommy tugged on Silas's sleeve. Mr. Reed, can we go home now? Silas looked down at the boy, then at Chen, then at May, then at the horizon where the mountains rose blue and gold against the summer sky, and somewhere beyond them, a patch of scorched earth waited where a cabin used to stand. Yeah, he said. Let's go home. They returned to Dalton Creek 5 days later. The ride was slow, Chen couldn't take the pace, and nobody was in a hurry anymore. They camped under the stars, and May cooked over open fires, and Tommy caught trout in a stream with his bare hands and brought them back so proud you'd have thought he'd lassoed the moon. The ranch was ash. They stood at the gate, the same gate where Silas had nailed the sign that said, "No one owns," and looked at what was left. The cabin was a skeleton of charred timbers. The barn was a pile of blackened rubble. Only the stone chimney still stood pointing at the sky like a finger. Tommy's lip trembled. It's all gone. May put her arm around his shoulders. No, it's not. The well's still good. The corrals can be rebuilt. The pasture's fine. She looked at Silas. And the foundation's solid. Silas walked to the chimney. He reached behind a blackened stone near the base, the same stone where in another life he might have placed a letter, and pulled out a tin box. He opened it. Inside were three things: Jesse's last payslip from the Union Army, stained and faded, a photograph of two brothers, young and grinning, taken before the war, and a single bullet on a thin chain. He held the bullet in his palm. Then he looked at May. "I've been carrying this for 25 years, he said. "Wearing it around my neck like a penance, like if I kept the thing that almost killed me close enough, it would somehow make up for Jesse dying instead of me." May waited. She didn't speak. "I don't want to carry it anymore." He walked to the small plot behind where the cabin had stood, the place where wild flowers would grow in spring, where the earth was soft and the sun hit just right in the afternoon. He knelt. He dug a small hole with his hands. He placed the bullet inside. Then he looked up at May. Do you have something from your father?" May's hand went to her throat. The jade pendant. Cracked. Frayed. The last piece of her mother, her father, her whole lost world. She unclasped it, held it in her palm. The jade was cool and smooth, and the crack down the middle caught the light like a river on a map. She knelt beside Silas. She placed the pendant next to the bullet. "Together," she said. They covered the hole. Silas placed a flat stone over it. May laid a sprig of wild sage on top. Tommy watched from the fence. Chen sat on a stump, his eyes closed, his lips moving in a prayer that was older than the country they were standing in. "We'll rebuild," Silas said, standing. "Bigger, stronger, room for everyone." "3 rooms," May said. "At least." "4," Tommy said. "I want my own room." "You get a room when you can build one," Silas said. "Grab a hammer." "I don't know how to build a room." "Then I'll teach you." Ruth Calloway arrived the next morning with a wagon full of lumber nails and a crew of 4 men from town. She climbed down, surveyed the wreckage, and put her hands on her hips. "Well," she said, "that's a mess." "Yes, ma'am," Silas said. "Good thing I brought help." She turned to May. "And I brought you something." She reached into the wagon bed and pulled out a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were dried herbs, seeds, small glass bottles, and a set of medical tools, a mortar and pestle scales measuring spoons. "For your practice," Ruth said. "The town needs a healer. I figured it might as well be the woman who saved my daughter." May opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Ruth." "Don't argue with me. I'm too old and too stubborn." Ruth looked at Silas. "Same goes for you." They built. Day after day, from dawn to dark, the ranch rose from the ashes. Silas and the townsmen framed the walls. Tommy hauled water and nails. Chen sat in the shade and supervised with the authority of a man who had once helped build a railroad across a continent. May cooked for the crew, tended the cattle, and in the evenings she laid out her herbs on a clean cloth and began the work her mother had trained her for. People came. Not many at first. A rancher's wife with a fever that wouldn't break. A miner with a cough that rattled like gravel. A child with a burn that had gone sour. May treated them all. She didn't charge what she couldn't. She didn't turn anyone away. Word spread. The Chinese healer at the Reed Ranch. She knows things the doctors don't. She listens. She's patient. She's good. Not everyone accepted it. There were still looks, still whispers. A man in town spat on the ground when May walked past. Silas saw it. He turned toward the man. May put her hand on his arm. "Don't," she said. I know what he did, and I know what I am. I don't need every man in this territory to respect me, Silas. I just need the ones who matter." She squeezed his arm. "And I've got them." On a warm evening in late August, with the new cabin standing strong and the smell of fresh-cut pine in the air, May and Silas stood on the ridge behind the house. the same ridge where the old cabin had looked out over the pasture. Below them, the cattle grazed beside the creek, healthy now, fat on good grass. The yellow star thistle burned clean from the banks. Tommy sat on the new porch, whittling a stick with a knife Silas had given him. Old Chen dozed in a rocking chair that Ruth Calloway had delivered with a note that said, "For the old man. Tell him to stay off horses." Silas. "Yeah. I want to say something and I want you to listen without talking. That's going to be hard. Try." He nodded. May took a breath. "When you found me at that trading post, I was already dead. Not my body was still fighting. But everything inside me, everything that made me a person was gone. I had been sold, chained, beaten, starved, and used until there was nothing left but a voice that could still beg." She paused. "And then you knelt down and unlocked that chain, and you didn't ask for anything. You didn't touch me. You didn't look at me like I was something you'd bought. You looked at me like I was someone you'd found." Silas's jaw tightened. His eyes glistened. "You didn't save me," May said. "I want to be clear about that. You didn't rescue me like some story in a book. What you did was harder. You stood still. You built a place that was safe and quiet and open, and you let me walk into it on my own feet." She turned to face him. "I chose to stay. I chose to fight. I chose to love you. Those were my choices. And I need you to know that they're the first real choices I've ever made in my life." Silas didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat was locked, and his eyes were burning, and his hands were shaking the way they did after Shiloh, but for a different reason now. Not fear, not grief, something bigger. Something that filled the spaces where the old wounds used to live. "I love you, Silas Reed," May said. "Not because you freed me, because you let me free myself." He reached for her. She reached for him. They held each other on that ridge with the sun going down, and the mountains turning gold, and the sound of Tommy's whistling floating up from the porch, and Chen's soft snoring drifting through the open window. No vows, no preacher, no ceremony. Just two people holding on. Below them, the new cabin stood solid and strong, its walls still pale with fresh wood, its chimney already darkened with smoke. A home built from ash. A family built from choice. Silas pulled back and looked at her. "I love you too, in case that wasn't clear." "It was clear, Silas. It's been clear for a while." "Yeah, well, I'm slow. You're thorough. There's a difference." He laughed. That same deep, startled laugh from the courthouse steps. And May laughed with him, and the sound carried down the ridge and across the pasture, and into the valley, where it mixed with the wind and the cricket song, and the steady, ancient heartbeat of the land. That night Silas nailed something above the front door of the new cabin. A piece of wood hand-carved, the letters burned deep with a branding iron. May read it by lantern light. She pressed her fingers against the letters and felt their heat still fading in the grain. It read, "The Reed House, built by many, owned by none, home to all." She turned to Silas. He stood behind her, hat in his hands, his scarred face soft in the lantern glow. "Welcome home, May," he said. She took his hand. "Welcome home, Silas." Behind them, through the open door, the fire crackled, and the kettle sang, and a boy's laughter echoed off the new walls. And in the hills beyond the ranch, the coyotes called, not mournful this time, but wild and free and alive, singing to a sky full of stars that didn't care who you were or where you came from, only that you were here, still standing, still choosing, still burning bright against the dark. May stepped through the door. Silas followed. The door closed behind them, not locked, not bolted, just closed. Because a home isn't a place you lock yourself into. It's a place you're finally free enough to stay.